So, what have we got? We've got this this combination of Bilam and Balak, who are coming together in order to try to destroy the Jewish people. We've got Bilam, who's this incredible, I don't know what you want to call him, I don't know, sorcerer, that has the ability to be able to curse the Jewish people, and Balak has got this incredible ability to know where. So between them, it's like a pretty explosive combination, right? He'll take them to where it needs to be done, and then he'll do the dirty deed. So let's have a look and see. Down at the bottom, 39. Ve'ilech Bilam and Balak ve'yovo Kiryat Chutzot. So they come to the place called Kiryat Chutzot. Ve'yizbach Balak boko v'tzoin v'yishalach leVilam v'lesarim asher itoi. And ve'yibaboike. So here we're about to get going over here. In the morning, ve'yikach Balak es Bilam ve'aleu b'mois Baal, and he brings him to this place called Bamot Baal. From over there, he knows through some kind of a, I don't know whether it's prophecy or some kind of an insight of some kind, he knows that things are going to go badly for the Jewish people, which means that the whole idea over here of knowing where to curse people, not just when to curse, but where to curse, is because these places have a certain kind of a spiritual power to them. Right? If the Jewish people are going to do something over there which is wrong, then that's going to allow for negative powers to be utilized against them. An interesting idea, which means it's not, you know, sometimes we're left with the impression that everything is random. This place became a place with a negative connotation because something happened over there. What we're really learning over here is that something terrible happened over there because the place itself has negative connotations. Right? Which means it's not something which is brought into being because of what happened, but rather what happened was brought into being because of the place itself. The emphasis that we have this in a different dimension, we have it in the same way with regards to good things as well. You know, for example, the months of the year, the Jewish months of the year, each month has got its own dynamic, it's got its own power to it. So, for example, the month of Nisan is known as the month of the redemption. It's not called the month of redemption because Pesach happens in the month of Nisan, but rather Pesach happened in Nisan because Nisan has that power to be the month of redemption. You know, the month of Elul and Tishrei, which is a month preceding Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and the month of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur itself, those are the months of Tshuva. It's easier to do Tshuva inside of those months because the months themselves are designed.
And God, I think God, I heard, does that on purpose. Like, there's certain times of the year when, like, you feel an inspiration and motivation to, like, really work.
Yeah.
Like, midsummer or, like, beginning of summer is not, like, you can get motivated before summer, but, like, it's better to get motivated during the months of, like, Elul and Tishrei because you have Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, so, like, it gives you that uplifting feeling. But other months, like, there's, like, a cycle of the way.
Yeah, for sure. The cycle is going around, and it's got its own dynamic to it, which means that it's feeding itself. I've never seen this written anywhere, but I think it's an interesting idea. You know, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur always appear, not always, but almost regularly around September time. September time is really the end of the summer. I mean, over here in Israel, the summer, moves on. Normally October is still summertime as well. But the idea of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and Sukkot are the gateways into the winter months. And it's interesting that we've got this incredible sense of spiritual uplifting and an incredible sense of acute, intense spirituality that's going to take us into the winter. The winter, of course, is a time it's a little bit more difficult to become motivated in the winter because it's colder and it's darker and so we're going to take that incredible block of spirituality that Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and Sukkot bring with it, and that's going to carry us through, to get us through until we reach Pesach, and then we can start up all over again. In all events, he brings him to a place which is not a good place to be, right? It's got very, very negative connotations. Let's flip over the page and let's see. We're going to see this something very fascinating within the details of what's going on. Vayomer Bilam el Balak, b'nei li bazeh shiva mizbachot. Now, Balak has to build, for Bilam he's got to build 7 altars. Why 7 altars? So it's to try to offset, according to one opinion, it's trying to offset the 7 sacrifices that were offered since the time of Adam from the various righteous people that have offered up sacrifices. So Adam and Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. That's one possibility. The other possibility is it's against the 7 righteous leaders of the Jewish people. It's as if Bilam, you know, we mentioned this. Hold on a second. We mentioned this yesterday. You know, Bilam is doing his best to try to pull a fast one over God. He imagined that if he behaves like a righteous person, then God's going to imagine that he's righteous and he's going to do what he wants him to do. So he's building 7 altars in order to try to balance off either the 7 righteous leaders of the Jewish people or the 7 sacrifices that were offered up by some of the righteous people up until now. In effect, what's he doing? He thinks he can bribe God by doing the same thing in order to be able to get away with it. Yeah, sorry, you wanted to...
Who said Balaam and Balak were trying to destroy the Jews?
Yes, they are.
That seems to be that they're Jewish, huh?
Huh?
Are they Jewish?
No, not at all. Absolutely
Why
not.
so
They
Hashem
come
giving
from...
them,
Oh, we'll get to that as well. It's a good question. Hold on to it. Right? But just for the meantime, I just want you to follow what's going on over here. Right? This Bilam, he knows what he's doing. He's a pretty wily character. And I want you to bring on these 7 altars that are going to be offered up. We're going to have 7 bulls and 7 rams. Right? He does this a few times on the way. Each time he's offering up these things. In the Medrash it says like this: the real reason why Bilam asked Balak to build 7 altars and to bring this an enormous amount of sacrifices over here, right? Seven bulls and 7 rams, and he's going to do this a few times, which means it is all mounting up. It's all, it's a lot going on over here. It's a lot of money. The Medrash says the real reason he's doing this has got nothing to do with trying to offset the 7 sacrifices that have been offered up by the righteous people up until now, but rather he had his nose put out of joint because when he came the night before, Balak didn't honor him properly and didn't give him enough food, and he didn't treat him in the way that Bilam felt he needed to be treated. So Bilam now decides that he's going to stuff Balak, right? And Balak's going to have to end up supplying huge amounts of animals in order to keep these sacrifices going, not because he feels that it's really going to help anything, he just wants to get back at him. So we see, it's interesting all the way through this, that Bilam, even though he's got all the answers, even though he's got all the, he behaves in this way, but nevertheless, what's lurking behind it is nothing more than an ego. Right? The ego is something which is... that there's a posuk. It says like this. Moshe Rabbeinu says in the Torah, in Sefer Dvarim, I think it is, that Moshe says, "Va'anochi omed lifneichem v'lifnei Hashem," something like that. That the Moshe says that he's going to stand between the Jewish people and God. And he's going to be their spokesperson. The Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement, he says like this. He makes a play on the word. And he says, what is it that stands in between a person and God? The Anochi, the ego, the I. Like, what stops us from connecting together to God? What stops us from doing what we need to do and really subjugating ourselves in order to do what God wants us to do? It's the ego, it's the me. I don't want to do it. I don't want to be told what to do. I want to be my own boss. By Bilam, we see the most enormous ego that's lurking behind everything that he does, and that's what's fueling his behavior. What's interesting is, within the sacrifices that are brought each time, he's always bringing bulls and rams. Inside of the temple, there were 3 different kinds of animals that were sacrificed, right? Animals, not birds. 3 different kinds. What were there? There were bulls, and there were rams, and there were goats or lamb, right? Sheep, baby sheep, yeah? It's interesting that over here you would have imagined that this Bilam, if he's so on the ball, right, he's so put together, you would imagine that he would bring sacrifices that would represent all of these, right, all 3 of them. But rather, what does he do? He brings bulls and he brings rams, but he does not bring the goats or the sheep. Right? Why is that? So I saw once the most incredible idea that sheep and goats, they move around in flocks. Bulls and rams are much more individualistic. But sheep, that's how they live, right? They live in a flock, and the truth is that they look after, bless you, they look after each other, because they're a flock, they look after each other. The Sfas Emes, one of the great Hasidic Rabbis, asked, there's a very famous story, it says Moshe Rabbeinu, way back when, before the Exodus from Egypt, so he's guarding he's looking after his father-in-law's flocks, and one of the sheep, one baby sheep, disappears. So it says that what did Moshe do? Moshe went running off after that little sheep to try and find it. So us as Sfas Emes, that doesn't make any sense, does it? Let's say you got a flock of 1,000 sheep. So surely looking after, one of them goes missing, so fine, one of them's gone missing. Surely it makes more sense to look after 999 sheep and to let whatever happens to the other one, it's going to happen. What can you do? So it explains the Sfas Emes, it doesn't work like that by sheep. Because sheep, when they're in their flock, they can look after themselves. The one sheep by itself, though, there's no way that it's going to be able to survive. That's the sign of a leader. The sign of a leader is to build some kind of a collective group where the collective group can work within itself and to worry about the individuals within each part of that collective group. So I saw it's a very beautiful idea. Bilam, he's happy to bring sacrifices which represent individuality. He's happy to bring the sacrifices of the rams, and he's happy to bring the sacrifices of the bulls. But he won't bring the sacrifice which represents the concept of collective responsibility, because that's something which goes against Bilam's nature. Right? The only thing that Bilam is concerned about is Bilam. He doesn't care about anybody else. Right? We've seen that from before. We saw that, like I told you yesterday, the concept of the word Bilam is Bli'am. He owes no loyalty to anybody. You pay him, he'll do whatever you want him to do. Somebody else comes along and pays more than you're paying, he'll just transfer his allegiance. Yeah.
How do we know that the Chumash isn't just a bunch of stories that just have good lessons to it?
Okay. I mean, how do we know that? So, that first of all, there's a tradition that we've got, which is passed down from Sinai, that this is the Torah that we've got is a Torah that's never been changed and never will be changed. The question over here is, what's the, I'm not sure how to phrase this properly, but what is the important dimension of the Torah over here? Is it the stories or is it the messages? Right? Is it the commandments or is it the stories? So interestingly enough, I think we would all say, if we asked that question, we would all say the same thing, right? Obviously the messages and obviously the commandments and the stories themselves are of lesser importance. The Zohar, right? The Zohar HaKodesh says not like that. The Zohar HaKodesh says they're equally important. The Zohar HaKodesh says that all of the stories that are brought down over here are stories that have eternal messages together with them. They're not stories that can be created. The story, because of the message, there's an infinite dimension to what the Torah has to offer. And what we're trying to do is that we're trying to tap in to what's behind the story. Which means that over here, it's true, we've got a whole story over here. It's a fascinating story. It's about, a lot of insights into human nature, that's for sure. That we can learn from Bilam and the way that Bilam behaves. But together with all of that, we've got lessons that are going to take us through from the time that it happened all the way through until the end of time itself.
The thing is, it's a collection of stories. It's a historical document, the Torah. There was probably thousands and thousands of other stories that happened.
Oh, for sure, right? Absolutely. Which means it's a historical. Let's try to make a little bit of seder over here. It's a historical document, but it's not a history book. Yeah. Which are two different things, right? Which means that the historical documentation over here is something which is important enough to get in. Like you say, we've got 40 years worth of being in the desert. Most of the time, we don't know very much about what's going on at all.
We only know the stories that are pertaining to a moral message,
whatever's being given over to us, right? That's what's there because it's got an eternal message. It's interesting, actually. It's even more than the Chumash itself. It says that the prophets, that there were many, many more prophets than the prophecies that we've got. Right? There are 24 books inside of Tanakh. There are 24 books, but the sages say that there were many, many, many more than that. Alright, so why are we left only with the 24 books that we've got? Because those are the ones that have eternal messages that can be used throughout every single generation. Right? A nevuah, a prophecy that was given to somebody for right now. Somebody comes along and he's given prophecy to help something happen now, but it doesn't have an eternal message. That's something which we don't have any connection to. Yeah,
I was just going to point out that it's got lots of lists of lineages and purchases, so it's very much a record book in a very literal sense. But also,
yeah, for sure.
We had many other books that didn't go into Tanakh. many other.
Not, I don't know if they were books, but there were definitely many more prophetic moments of which we don't have any record of at all. There were some books that weren't included into Tanakh. What are known as the Apocrypha. Right? And there's books like, Ben Sira and Sefer HaMaccabim, which they're a little bit obscure, but nevertheless they're books which were considered not to have been written with what's called Ruach HaKodesh, with divine inspiration, which means they're very interesting. And some of them, Sefer HaMaccabim, for example, is a fascinating account of what happened to the Maccabees, not just with their fight against the Greeks, but what happened afterwards as well. But it never made it in, because it's not part. It doesn't have that dimension of divine inspiration that goes together with it, huh?
You still buy them books?
They're around, yeah, for sure. But here, for example, like there's a whole discussion in the Gemara. There's a whole discussion about whether Megillas Esther, which is the story of Esther, the story of Purim, whether it should be included in the Tanakh or not. Shir HaShirim, Song of Songs, whether it should be included in Tanakh or not. Which means it's not, we just take it all for granted. This is Tanakh, this is what's in there, and obviously, these are obviously very, very prophetic, very beautiful works that have to be put in because of the messages they've got. But at the time that the Tanakh was being canonized, at that point there was a whole deliberation and a whole debate about what should go in and what shouldn't go in.
And so it was leveled, started with.
Yeah, for sure. You've got the 5 books of Moses, and then you've got the prophets, and then you've got the writings. And there's certainly sort of gradations. Interestingly enough, within the prophets themselves, there are gradations of which prophets are considered to be more important and which are less. Again, not that didn't come out right. That came out with a slight lack of respect. I don't mean less as in that they call that there's a book called Treasa, which is called the 12 prophets, and they call the 12 minor prophets. I don't know why they're called minor. I think it's because their books are much smaller. It's not that the prophets, it's just that there are levels of prophecy to do with their clarity, right? To do with the importance of the message that's being given across. And some of them are considered to be much more fundamental, and some of them are considered to be a little less. It doesn't, but obviously to get in means that it's got to be pretty important. So he builds these 7 altars. And then he starts offering up. I'm trying to. I mentioned yesterday when he curses the Jewish. When Bilam blesses the Jewish people, of course he's only doing what God is making him do. Right? He's being coerced into saying things that he wouldn't normally say.
What is it, like a sorcerer?
Yeah. However, the Gemara says that from Bilam's blessing, you can see what his curse was supposed to be. So let's have a look and see. Vayikra Elokim al Bilam, verse number 4. Vayom elav es shiva zemizbecho yisarachti v'atzal parvau b'mizbeach vayosem Hashem dover piv Bilam. And so God now puts words into the mouth of Bilam. Vayom shuva al Balak v'cho yisedaber. This is what you have to say. Vayoshav elav v'hinei nitzav alo yitzoi v'hu v'chol sarei Moav v'yisom mishalav v'yomad min aram yenacheni Balak melech o Moav marei kedem l'cho ora li Yaakov v'l'chol zoyma Yisrael. Ma ekoiv loy kaboy kel. How can I curse? Right? God is not cursed. Uma ezoim loy za'am Hashem. How can I anger if God is not angry? Now, yesterday I pointed out Bilam's expertise was being able to identify that moment in the day where God becomes angry. Which means that right now, what Bilam is saying is like this. He's saying, how can I curse if God is not cursed? How can I anger if God is not angry? We see from there, of course, what does he want to do? He wants to curse. He needs God's anger in order to make that curse work, in order for it to do what it needs to do. Ki miroish tzurim erenu umigvois ashurenu hein am levadad yishkoin uvagoim lo yischashov. So it says over here, I see it rock-like, from the hills do I see it. Behold, it's a nation that will dwell in solitude and not be reckoned amongst the other nations of the world. The Maharal has got a really fascinating idea over here. You need to know a little bit of Hebrew, but the last line on the page over here, it says, Hein am levadad. Now, Hein, here, Rabbi Scroll has translated it as behold. like an expression of, I don't know, surprise. You know, Hein am levadad, they are a nation that lives by themselves. The Maharal says that the truth is that you could get away with this sentence without using the word Hein at all. Bilam could just have said, Am levadad yishkoin, that they are a nation which lives by themselves. So explains the Maharal like this, a very fascinating idea. The word Hein is spelled Hey and Nun. In numerical terms, a Hey is a 5, and Nun is 50. What's called gematria. Says the Maharal, the Maharal's very big on putting numbers together in order to reach the number 10, in order to reach the number 100. Those are considered to be whole numbers, where you're reaching a state of completion. Says the Maharal like this, if you want to get to 10, and you want to use the numbers from 1 to 10, you can combine two numbers in order to get to number 10, except for 5. Which means you can combine 1 and 9 and that will equal 10, and 2 and 8 will equal 10, and 3 and 7 will equal 10, and 4 and 6 will equal 10. 5 can only be added to itself in order to reach 10. The same is true with getting up to 100. 10 and 90 will get you to 100. 20 and 80 will get you to 100. 50 can only be added to 50 in order to reach 100. Says the Maharal, the word Hein is here to define the essence of the Jewish people. The essence of the Jewish people is to remain, we have to remain amongst ourselves, that there shouldn't be any kind of assimilation, there shouldn't be any kind of intermarriage that will take us away from where we're supposed to be. The other nations of the world, when they intermarry with each other, it doesn't have any spiritual repercussions. Right? Which means that when an Italian marries somebody from Greece, or an American marries somebody from, dare I say it, from Canada, whatever, don't take it personally. That's okay. What's going to happen? There's no spiritual repercussions to having the other nations of the world intermingle with each other and intermarry with each other. But for the Jews there is. And that's why it says at the end, Uvagoyim lo yischashav, that means that we're not reckoned amongst the other nations of the world. There are 70 nations of the world. That's the way that the sages explain the number 70 is a complete number. Number 7 represents nature, multiplied by 10. Anything multiplied by 10 is like the totality of that thing. Which means that there are 70 basic nations in the world. Of course, there are many more than 70 nations today, but they're offshoots of the original 70. There are hold on a second. There are 70 languages in the world, and the languages also are offshoots of the original 70. But that number 70 is not including the Jewish nation, and it's not including the Hebrew language. Which means that when it says over here that the Jewish people are going to live by themselves, what it means is that we're not a part of the natural dimension of the physical world. Yeah.
So, but we're allowed to marry a Jew from Canada.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I don't know about Canada, but I mean, again, you're really sort of going off to the extreme over there. But, you can marry Jews from anywhere. Doesn't matter where they come from, right? Because over here, the Jewish identity is coming through our religion. It's not coming through our nationality. Right? That's why Jews intermingle all over the world. That was one of the most beautiful things. The Rav Meir Shapiro, one of the great rabbis from just before the Second World War, was the instigator of what's known as the Daf Yomi program. What is Daf Yomi? Everyone should learn a page of Gemara every day. And it's a cycle that takes 7.5 years to complete. One of the most basic reasons why he thought that Daf Yomi would be a fantastic idea is because he realized that Jews, they're all over the world. And a person traveling around on business, for example, could walk into any shul anywhere in the world and sit down together with them and learn the same page of Gemara that he's learning back wherever he came from. It's like a glue that sticks the whole of the Jewish people together. Right? We're all sort of holding in the same place. We're all learning the same concepts at the same time. It's a very beautiful idea.
I started reading Gemara yesterday. I find it quite complicated.
Good. You're supposed to. It is. You know why, right? Because it is. What's the idea though? The idea is like this. From here we see that Bilam, what's he blessing the Jewish people with? That what? that they should be a nation by themselves and they shouldn't intermingle culturally, they should stay apart, that they should be different. But through the blessing, you see what the curse was supposed to be. Which means, what was his curse? That Bilam had a very simple idea, right? That if you want to get rid of the Jewish people, so have them begin the process of intermarriage, of allowing themselves to get absorbed into the secular societies around, or even the other religious societies around, but the non-Jewish societies around, the different cultures that exist. And at some point, Judaism will become so watered down that it won't exist anymore.
Can you just do a little bit more about that last verse? And the Hebrew is very strange, very bizarre. The Asorenu and then the Arenu, we will show it's strange.
Where are you? Verse number 9.
That,
Yeah. First of all, what's the problem? The problem is it's very poetic.
yes.
Right, and it's always very difficult to do justice to poetry when you're trying to translate it into a different language. Ki mirosh tsurim ereno, I see it rock-like. What is rock-like? God is called a tsur. God is called a rock. Now, what is the idea of something? A rock is something which is there, something massive, something unchanging. Right? God is our rock. That's who we rely upon. So ki mirosh tsurim erenu umigvaot ashureno, and from the hills do I see it. So according to one medrash, it's interesting. There are three very, very important hills, three very important mountains in Jewish history. There is Har Sinai, of course, right, where the Torah was given. There is Har Carmel, which is the Carmel mountain, which is the famous story of Elijah going over there and hiding himself away. And there's also Har Habayit, Har Moriah, which is where the temple was built. Those are the three, I mean, pun intended, but the three spiritual peaks that the Jewish people had at various times in history are going to be found over there. It's interesting, in the Yalkut Shimoni it says that when the Mashiach comes, one of the signs of the Mashiach coming is going to be these three mountains joining together. Again, I don't think it means physically necessarily, but the idea of these three potent powers, what they represent, joining themselves together in order to allow the Mashiach to come. How is all of that going to take place? Hein am levadan yishkom, because we're supposed to live by ourselves.
You realize one's in the north, one's in the center, and one's in the south.
Yeah, interesting, right? Maybe some kind of a spine over here, right? That's like the spine that's going to connect everything together. Yeah. So hein am levadan yishkom v'goyim lo yitchashav, which means that we have to remain amongst ourselves. That's our calling. That's what we're supposed to do. And if you flip over the page, we'll see over here something very interesting. Verse number 10, it says, Mi manafa Yaakov mispais Reuven Yisrael. And then it says, Tamot nafshi mot yisharim, uti achariti kamo. And then Bilam says, I want to die the death of the upright, and may my end be like his. It's talking about Aaron, it's talking about Moshe, right? So the Mefarshim point out, of course, that Bilam, this is the all-American dream, right? Bilam wants to die the death of the righteous. He doesn't want to live like a righteous person, though. That's too much hard work, right? But when the time comes to go, right, he'd like to be able to die as a righteous person, to be considered to be righteous. What's I think we're all of us guilty in some way or another. We all of us are guilty of that mindset, which is somehow or other I'll be able to do whatever I want to do and I'll get away with it. But when I die, God's going to look at me as being a righteous person. And because of the small amount that I've managed to do, God will look at that and say, okay, well, listen, we're going to discount everything else and we're only going to look at the good. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. It really doesn't. And this idea of wanting to die the death of the righteous without living the life of the righteous, then that's no good. Verse number 11, So Balak, you can imagine, he's not very happy with what's going on. Right? Balak brought in Bilam in order to curse the Jewish people, in order that he should be able to overcome them. In the meantime, what's happened? Well, he's just gone and blessed them, which is not really what Balak had in mind. So he says, Vayan vayoyma haloi es asher yosim Hashem befi oisoyesh moledaber. I told you, he says, Bilam says to Balak, I told you that I can only do what God's going to let me do. I can't say anything except for what God says. So Balak says, okay, let's go somewhere else. We'll find another place, and over there we'll make another thing, and what happens over there, of course, is exactly the same thing as before, in a slightly different way. Let's go down to chapter number 24. There's something very, very famous over here that we'll see. Vayah Bilam ki tov b'nei Hashem levarech es Yisrael v'lo yalach kefam b'fam likas nechoshim v'yoshes el hamidbar ponov v'yiso Bilam es einav v'yas Yisrael shoichin nishvotov. So he goes to look at the Jewish people. He wants to be able to look down and what's the idea? Bilam is hoping that he'll look at the Jewish people encamped and he'll see all kinds of, bad things that exist within the Jewish people, and he'll be able to pinpoint them and to curse. He'll use that as a springboard to curse the Jewish people. And God comes to him. Nu'um bilam b'noi bo'on nu'um hagever shesum ha'ayin. Nu'um shomer imrei kel, Hashem achazei shakai yechse nefer glu einayim. And here, verse number 5, very, very famous verse. Why is it very famous? We'll see. It's in the davening, that almost one of the first things that we say every morning when we pray, right on page 870, in verse number 5 is, Ma toivu o'alecha Yaakov, how goodly are your tents, O Jacob, Mishkano Yisecha Yisrael, your dwelling place is Israel. Explains the Gemara what happened. He looked down at the Jewish nation and he sees them encamped over there, and he sees that there's not one opening pointing into anyone else's tent, which means that all of the openings, all of the windows and all of the doors are pointing in directions where it's not possible to look into somebody else's tent. That's the most incredible concept of modesty over here. Privacy, right? That this is my tent, that's your tent, that's your life, that's my life. I don't have to see what you're doing. This verse always makes me laugh. Over here in Israel, Israel is a rather small geographic location. There's rather a lot of people living over here, right, per capita, compared to the amount of space there is. And in order to be able to make space for everybody, so they put up buildings all over the place, and most places have got windows where you don't have to just you can't just look into somebody else's apartment. If you open the window, you hear what's going on. You can stick your hand into their apartment and everything, because the buildings are so close to each other. And yet, interestingly enough, over here we see the most incredible dimension of what's called tzniut, of modesty. Not to have something like that, right? To keep things private. What goes on in my home is my own private business. Interesting, I heard a beautiful idea many years ago from the present Boston Rebbe of Meir Horowitz. Then his father was the Rebbe, and he asked a very simple question. He said, can you imagine the logistics of having to pitch the camp, and everybody's got to put their tents up, making sure that no windows are pointing into anyone else's windows? He said, how did they do that? Every single time they took the camp down, and then they put it back up again, and they moved along, and they've got to do it all the same way again. So he said that he thinks the answer is very simple, that all of the openings were at the front of the tents, and the tents were all pointing towards the middle of the encampment. In the middle of the encampment was the tabernacle. That's where the tablets of stone were, and the camp was in a square going around the tabernacle, and everybody's openings were pointing only towards the tabernacle. They couldn't see what was going on in anybody else's home. It's a beautiful idea. The question is like this. We all of us know from what we've learned that Bilam is not exactly, held up to be the role model for a fine, upstanding Jewish fellow. So why is Bilam being used? Why is his prayer being used in our tefillah? If you open up any siddur, at the beginning of davening, at the beginning of the prayers, one of the things that you come across is Ma toivu alecha Yaakov Mishkan Yisech Yisrael. Why are we using Bilam's prayer in order to begin our prayers in the morning? So the answer is something which is actually very deep. If we were to use a prayer from Moshe, we would expect Moshe Rabbeinu to praise us, right? We would expect Moshe Rabbeinu to speak well about the Jewish nation. We don't expect Bilam to do that. You get up in the morning and you're stumbling around, looking with your morning face, right, and your eyes glued shut with sleep, and your stubble and your hairy breath, and your mother says to you, "Wow, you look so handsome," I'm not sure you should believe her. I'm really not, right? Jewish mothers have a habit of saying these things. They really do, right? But if somebody who doesn't like you says something about you, praises you,
Cataract problem.
if somebody who doesn't like you praises you, then you have to imagine that what they're saying is something of tremendous worth, right? If Bilam says, "Ma toivu o alecha Yaakov mishkanesechi Yisrael," if Bilam could say something like that, then that really means that there's something special about the Jewish people. And it's interesting because the rabbis say that out of the 4 times that Bilam blesses the Jewish people, 3 of them he does against his will. 3 of them he really wants it to be a blessing, he really wants it to be a curse, which gets flipped around and comes out as a blessing. But this one over here, Bilam looks down, sees the sanctity and the modesty of the Jewish camp, and he says, "Ma tov olecha Yaakov, you've got great, you people are very modest, you people are very sanctified, you people should really stay away, we don't have anything to do with you. I don't want to live like that." That's really what he's saying. He's saying it from his heart. He's saying it's something very special, but it's not for me. I can never live like that. It's a very fundamental idea. This idea of the concept of unity within the Jewish people is something which is paradoxically defined by the concepts of privacy and of modesty, and that's what unites us together. And that's the power that Bilam saw. So here, with the few minutes that we've got left, somebody asked a question yesterday. He's not here today, but it's a very important question. It really is. The pasuk says in Sefer Devarim, the pasuk says, "Lo yikam Yisrael oid k'Moshe," that there was never a prophet like Moshe ever again inside of the Jewish nation. Says the Gemara, that's a very strange language. What do you mean, "Lo yikam Yisrael oid k'Moshe," that there was nobody within the people of Israel like Moshe? What is that inferring? Is that inferring that there was somebody who outside of the Jewish people who's like Moshe? So says the Gemara, yes. Who is that? Bilam.
In terms of the possession, the Shekhinah that possessed was able to possess Moshe.
Oh, good. Okay, so here.
Level, but on a different quality.
Oh, so what are we saying over here? We're saying that what? We're saying that Bilam is the Moshe Rabbeinu to the other nations of the world. Which in theory is fine. That makes sense, doesn't it? The other nations of the world have to have, it says like this, that the other nations of the world, in order that they shouldn't be able to come to Moshe and say, listen, they come to God and say, listen, if you would have given us a Moshe Rabbeinu, then we too could also have reached those levels. So who did God give them? God gave them Bilam. And then God says, here, I gave you Bilam, and here, it didn't work. It's not my problem, it's yours. You hear the problem? Moshe Rabbeinu is this super deluxe spiritual guy who speaks to God and is able to reflect God's majesty here in this world. He's so spiritual that he's got to wear some kind of a veil over his face in order to stop people being bothered by the spirituality that's pouring out of him. And balanced off against that is who is Bilam? Who is Bilam? He's a degenerate, debauched, no good. What can I tell you? We spoke about it yesterday. Right? He's involved in bestiality, he's involved in idol worship, he's involved in all the things which are the opposite of what Moshe represents. So how is it conceivable, how does it work? How is it conceivable that God could possibly say to the other nations of the world, oh, you want a Moshe? Here, I'll give you Bilam, and now you people, you can have your Moshe, and you can do good, yeah.
It's the, like Moshe, like everyone gets born with a certain amount of potential to reach their goal. Moshe had the greatest potential and he reached that potential. Bilam had that potential, but he just didn't reach that potential.
Of course, the problem with what you're saying is that it's rather disturbing. Why is that, right? Because what's the pshat? It's not saying that Bilam and Moshe were at the end of their lives on the same level. Bilam had the same potential within him to be able to lead the other nations of the world in the way that Moshe did, the way that Moshe led the Jewish people. But what we're learning over here is what? Moshe didn't get it wasn't a free ticket. Moshe worked very hard in order to become Moshe Rabbeinu. If Bilam would have worked very hard, he would have become Bilam Rabbeinu, right? But he didn't do it. Quite the opposite. He allowed his potential to just spiral out of control and to turn into something else altogether. Hold on a second. There's a very famous commentary on the Mishnah called the Tiferes Yisrael. The Tiferes Yisrael brings a medrash, which I have to warn you that nobody's ever found the source. No one's ever found this medrash. But whether it's true or not, whether the medrash exists or not, the message is incredibly powerful. The Tiferes Yisrael brings a medrash that there was a king, as the Jewish people were going through the desert, there was a king who wanted to find out what Moshe Rabbeinu looked like. So he sent an artist to go to where the Jewish people were and to make a sketch, to make a portrait of Moshe Rabbeinu's face. So he does it. He goes and does what he does, and he comes back, and the king's taken aback because he says that the face is the face of a murderer. So he said, it can't be. Send somebody else to go and make another portrait. He comes back and he sees the face of a robber, of a thief. He sends him back and he comes back and he sends another one. It's the face of an adulterer. So finally the king says, I got to go and see what's going on. This doesn't make any sense. So he goes and he meets Moshe Rabbeinu and he sees Moshe Rabbeinu's face. That's exactly what he sees. He sees a murderer, he's an adulterer, he's a thief. All of that he can see inside of his face. So the king says to Moshe Rabbeinu, how can it be? So Moshe Rabbeinu says to him, it's true, that's who I am. Those are my natural tendencies. He says, but I work on myself every single moment of the day in order not to be like that. You hear? Again, I don't know whether the medrash is there, it's not there, nobody's ever found it. But what the message, the lesson for sure is there. There's no such thing as good or bad. They're called midot. What are midot? Characteristics, personality, right? There is no such thing as good or bad midot. You have raw material. And from that raw material, you'll turn it into something good or you'll turn it into something bad. Those are the options. That's what there is. And the idea of imagining that Moshe Rabbeinu was just some kind of one-off that was brought into the world as a Moshe Rabbeinu already, and he never did anything in order to become who he needed to become, that's very comfortable for us. Why? Because it means that no one's really demanding anything from us. But that's not the truth. The truth is that Moshe Rabbeinu did not come into the world as a Moshe Rabbeinu. The truth is that Moshe Rabbeinu has to work on himself in order to become Moshe Rabbeinu, and then Moshe Rabbeinu has to work on himself every single day to remain Moshe Rabbeinu. And what's applicable to Moshe is applicable to every single one of us. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given to every single one of us a huge amount, a huge reservoir of characteristics and traits. And now our task is to learn how to control them. Our task is to learn how to harness what God has given us and to turn it into something good. You want to say something?
Yeah, so if I had to put it in perspective, it's nowadays, everyone knows who LeBron James is. He's not the only one that had those sort of skills from where he's from or from the streets in general. But he's the one that took himself away from all the negative that goes on in the streets.
Yeah.
And actually, he had the potential, and he actually achieved that potential because of the actions that he made and everything else that he worked on to get to the point.
Good, right? And how many? What was his name?
LeBron James.
How many LeBron James wannabes are there who they don't do it because in order to become LeBron James, you have to work really hard, and you have to continue working hard as well. It's not something you don't just have it and then that's it. You don't have to train anymore. You don't have to work anymore. You don't have to do what needs to be. You got to carry on. Professional soccer players in England, they begin their training sessions at 6 o'clock in the morning. we probably have this idea in our minds that these people go out, they play football, they get paid a fortune, they go out all night partying, and then it doesn't work like that. They work very hard and they're on very special diets, and they've got to, it doesn't always work. There's always ones that are out of control. But in general, you have to work very hard, not just to reach those levels, but to retain those levels as well. And there are an infinite amount of very, very talented people that never make it because they don't have that focus. They're not able to do that. And here, Bilam is one of them. Right? Bilam could have been the LeBron James of his generation, right? But he blew it.